Hey everybody, and welcome to the August edition of At Home with ADTS, a monthly radio show where we discuss services and supports offered by our organization, as well as looking at topics that we think are of interest to our community. I'm Cathy Powers, the Executive Director at ADTS, and my co-host, as always, is Asheley Cooper, our Director of Adult Day Services. ADTS has been in operation in Rockingham County since 1973, and our goal is to enhance the quality of life for the people of Rockingham County, empowering them to achieve optimum health, well-being, independence, and participation in our community. We do this through 8 core programs that reach more than 17,000 people annually, but we can't do it alone. As state and federal funding remains stagnant, we rely heavily on our community to support us, to help us to meet this ever-growing and expanding need. So we like to start off every show by thanking the community partners and businesses that have supported ADTS through our Community Partners program over the past year. Thank you, as always, to Carolina Apothecary, Pelham Transportation, Wells Fargo, Home Trust Bank, CJ Medical, Sparks Oil, the Rockingham County Community Foundation, the Rockingham County Arts Council, Woodmont United Methodist Church, Colonial Funeral Home, Church of the Epiphany, JDK Automotive, Wilkerson Funeral Home, Annie Penn Hospital, Eden Rotary, BB&T, Reedsville Rotary, and Plaza Mini Storage. Thank you again for your continued support. We also like to give a special thank you to the United Way of Rockingham County for their longtime and generous support of our Meals on Wheels program. United Way of Rockingham County brings together local people to raise local dollars to meet local needs. We thank everyone who has continued to contribute to the campaign. Now I'm going to turn the program over to Asheley, who's going to talk to us a little bit about today's topic and introduce our guest.
Thank you, Cathy. Today we have joining us Bob Cleveland from the Piedmont Triad Regional Council Area Agency on Aging in Kernersville. That's a mouthful. We usually just refer to it as PTRC. He has over 30 years of experience working with older adults, individuals with disabilities, and their caregivers across independent living, nursing homes, and community-based settings. Tim Gallagher serves as President CEO of Safety Net Health North Carolina Incorporated, SNH, a nonprofit North Carolina corporation formed to enhance the North Carolina Safety Net's ability to fully participate in the Medicaid transformation efforts envisioned by North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, which is what we're going to talk about today, the changes that are happening to North Carolina Medicaid, which is hopefully enough time we have to do that.
It's a lot of ground to cover in a short amount of time, so let's just jump right into it. Before we actually start about Medicaid transformation and what that looks like, Bob, you work with the AAA, Area Agency on Aging, not the automotive group, not to be confused. And we, of course, have a relationship with AAA because of the programs that we serve, Meals on Wheels, Congregate Nutrition, Adult Day. All of those are supported by the Older Americans Act. But can you tell us a little bit about what AAA is?
Sure. Again, you mentioned that we receive federal and state funding for older adult services. The things you mentioned, the Meals on Wheels and transportation, in-home aid services, and many, many others. And it's our responsibility to make sure across a region area, rather than an individual county or the state contracting with many, many, many different human services providers, we're to take that responsibility on to make sure that the providers receive funding for their services, and then we also then have responsibility for in a sense the management of those services, make sure the providers are doing what they're supposed to be doing, make sure meals are delivered on time and the right temperatures, or that the in-home aides are going into the homes and doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the roles we have. The other role we have, a major role, is to fund the family caregiver program. So we focused for many years on older adults. In the year 2000, the Family Caregiver Support Act was added to the Older Americans Act, and so now the caregiver has also become a client. So making sure that they receive information and supports and respite so they can continue to do the caregiving that they do. We also have ombudsman services for people who are in long-term care facilities. When their rights have been maybe stepped on by the facility, the ombudsman go in and act as an advocate for the resident in that facility. And then lastly, I'll just say that we have a program of evidence-based services. So we are looking at programs and services that help people recognize that they have chronic conditions, but then how can they live more healthy with those in order not only one to be more healthy, but reduce their healthcare utilization.
Those are all things that we've talked about on a regular basis on the show. Of course, Ashley's got a lot of the caregiver supports at the Leaf Center. And
Yes, we do.
we've partnered over the years with the senior centers around here who are offering the evidence-based classes you've talked about.
Right.
And so a lot of great services around. And AAA is actually part of a larger umbrella organization, the PTRC, which is something that people may have also heard. So can you talk to us just a little bit about the PTRC and what that is?
Sure. As the PTRC, Piedmont Triad Regional Council, we are one of 16 councils of government that are across North Carolina. And just like the AAA is a regional organization, we are housed within PTRC, which is also a regional organization. And the PTRC, every council of government looks a little different, but ours, we have several different departments. Aging department, of course, is one. We have a planning department that helps communities look at roads, streams, infrastructure building. We have another department that is workforce, weatherization, criminal justice. So we do have several different services that the communities pay dues to our organization, and for that, then we provide return services.
And one of the new PTRC roles that you've just kind of stepped into, I believe that you guys have been awarded a grant that supports the education of North Carolinians about the North Carolina Medicaid transformation. So of course, that's why we've asked you to join us here today so that you guys can talk a little bit about that. But before we talk about how it's changing, can we talk a little bit about what is Medicaid? You know, a lot of people call us and they're like, well, I'm not sure. Is that the red, white, and blue card? And, you know, there's some confusion about Medicare versus Medicaid. So what is Medicaid and why is it changing?
Wow.
Big question.
So Medicaid is a program that covers over 2 million residents in our state. It is changing primarily because it's been a budget line item that has exceeded its growth rate. And so some time ago, they put it on a path to be administered through private health plans. And so several administrations have worked through that. The contracts have just recently gone out. There's now 4 statewide health plans and 1 local provider entity that are contracted and are going to be creating their networks, if not enrolling Medicaid recipients very shortly. So we've moved from a single program that everybody used the same service to a program that's serving right now 1.6 million ambulatory lives in a different kind of private market way that's supposed to bring out some additional benefits to the recipients. So if you looked at what historically Medicaid was and what the new offering is, it already includes some things that the state plan didn't. So there are some benefits. I don't want to leave on, off discussing. There is a certain pain to the transition,
Right.
but there is a reason that people before us put this in place, and there's a reason why benefits are expected from a system that's designed this way.
And this is not unique to North Carolina. North Carolina is kind of slow to the game, right, Rob?
Yes, North Carolina, I don't know exactly where we sit, but we're the 39th, maybe the 40th state that has come to this transition. So we do have, many other states have gone to managed care for Medicaid. And I know we'll get into this a little bit, but North Carolina is really in a prime position. We're one of the first states in the nation that is going to be using some of the dollars to pay for non-medical services.
Can you talk, I know that's a little further, and so I don't want to completely
right.
derail the conversation, but we were in a meeting this morning and you shared about the person who had gone to the hospital X number of times. Can you talk a little bit about that and how in our current system it's you go to the hospital and you get payment, the hospital gets payment for that service, and that's people are treated
Right.
episodically.
That's right, and that's typically called fee for service.
Right.
So you go to the doctor treats you, doctor bills for service, doctor gets paid. And under that system, there's been some general discussion over the years that there really hasn't been an incentive for the doctor to get you better, to treat you well, because every time you get sick, you come back and you get billed or you get paid for.
Yeah.
So what we talked about, for the example this morning, the story of this woman who she had 130 visits in 1 year to the emergency department. She had 4 chronic conditions. And after a year's time, this doctor group said, we need to send someone to this woman's home to find out what's going on with her. Well, it turns out she had no electricity. Even if she had electricity, she didn't have a working refrigerator. And it turns out she couldn't keep her insulin cold. So every 2 to 3 days, she's crashing, going into the ER. They fix her up, and where do they send her? Right back into the home, the same environment that's not working for her. So this doctor's group actually got together. They paid to get her utilities back on. They paid for her new refrigerator, stocked it with food, and sent a nurse case manager to do some education. And in that following year, after those interventions had been done, this woman had no visits to the ER. So from 130 to 0. And to take that further, if you ask some questions about it, well, okay, what did the doctors do? Did they do anything medical? Not really. You know, they provided these social supports. And that's, I think, where this direction of the state wants to move, is saying, or with this recognition that a lot of people don't need these medical interventions. If she had had those supports, that's 130 visits times $3,000 to $4,000 per visit each. You're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars that probably never needed to be spent, but she needed those social help.
Right, definitely. So who's typically covered under Medicaid? Because we're talking about a particular person with chronic illnesses. Is that usually a type of individual who's covered under Medicaid, or is it a certain,
Yeah.
I know there's kind of like carved out groups and things.
Yeah,
like
there's
that.
some broad categories of who qualifies for Medicaid in general, and I'm not the expert on that, and Tim may help with this, but typically you have women, infants, and children. That's kind of one broad category, and recognition that women, infants, and children, especially single mothers, have challenges. And Medicaid is a lower income program. So if you think of, you know, people who may buy health insurance or have insurance provided through your workplace, those individuals have coverage. But for people who have lower incomes, who can't afford to pay for that, they may qualify for Medicaid. So that's one of the first criteria, is you have to meet an income threshold. So that's one qualification. The other is typically called AABD, Assistance to the Aged, Blind, and Disabled. So individuals, again, who meet that income threshold, who also are, 60 or older, or has a physical disability, they have a certain section that qualifies for Medicaid. And those are two of the broadest groups that would qualify for Medicaid. So if you're a 45-year-old and you don't meet the income threshold, but you're not going to necessarily fall into one of those categories if you don't have a disability.
And I think that's always important to point out, because not everyone who meets that income threshold is covered under Medicaid.
Right.
You have to fall into one of those classifications. And under new Medicaid transformation, those classifications are not changing, right? Nothing's being opened up. This
Right,
is not Medicaid expansion.
Correct.
This is a transformation, but those criteria are still in place.
Correct.
The transformation, though, building on that, and you sound like an expert. I mean, you're doing great. We talked about managed Medicaid just being the 1.6 million ambulatory. So the special populations are some of those IDD, substance use, behavioral health populations that are receiving benefits. And when I think of Medicaid, just historically, you think about the people that need services that can't provide for themselves. Right? So we are raising a 24-year-old who is recipient of services, so I speak from it with a passion. But it shouldn't get confused with the ambulatory or the expansion efforts, but it often does. And so when you think about the current recipients, the people, everybody's changing. It's just we're talking about the 1.6 million in the first wave. The standard plans are in that first wave, but the tailored plans for the LME MCOs are right behind them. And I compliment the Secretary and everybody at the state for trying to integrate, health, if you will, behavioral and physical health. They didn't get it done. And so it was missed. It was a missed opportunity. They're trying to, merge later on, but we're left in this kind of limbo right now where not only are we not able to bring the 1.6 million on at one time, there's multiple phases for that. And then right behind that is this behavioral health, tailored plan population that's coming into the program. And then eventually there's potentially, integration between the two. And that's the baseline before we even talk about expansion. So how well Medicaid services are currently delivered and then are currently delivered in a changing environment is all this swim lane that is really moving quickly.
So we talked about, or you mentioned it was in the past, or currently it's fee-based, fee for service. So what is it moving to now?
Managed care is the label. That's
Okay,
being
and what does
called.
that mean?
Managed care is, again, it's a little bit different way of doing it. So the attempt is to go, or what I would call from fee for service to what we would call a value-based care. Managed care typically means you're going to end up with a care manager, someone overseeing your care to ensure that you have the best utilization of your health care as possible, so that you're not necessarily always running back to the emergency room, so you don't need those 160 visits, that you can cut them down to 0 or you cut them down to 5. So that you're using when you truly need that medical care. But if there are other services or supports you need, to try to provide those that impact our health in a positive way, to not need that medical intervention.
And so will I get to keep my doctor?
That's a very good question.
I feel like that's a question most people, that's the question I'm getting. Just so people are calling and asking me, or I'm hearing people who are starting on that first wave coming through and they're like.
It's not a good answer.
Yeah.
I mean, we were in the pediatrician recently, and they're part of a health system that hasn't signed. And so the other people that doctor's serving is getting the same questions. Hey, I went to look for you, couldn't find you as my primary care. I'm not signing up until I can. And they're being told by the enrollment broker to call back in a month. And so the same kind of issues that a customer faces is different than what we're talking. We're talking systemic, how do we explain it, but the actual rubber meets the road when somebody's trying to enroll. And it's not a smooth sailing ship at this point.
Well, nothing new is. It takes time to work out the kinks. But it sounds like, I appreciate the fact that they're trying to not bring everybody in at one time, that they're kind of phasing individuals in. And so who is the first phase in? What
Region
group?
2 and Region 4.
Okay.
So the state's been broken up into 6 Medicaid regions.
Okay.
They're new regions. They don't mirror any previously existing regions. And they split up the population in about 300,000 lives increments.
Okay.
And so Region 2 goes from, Forsyth and above, west, till it breaks, right?
To the state line, yeah.
No.
To the Tennessee border,
Yep.
and then to the Virginia border.
And so if we had a map, and then 4 is the one to our right.
Okay.
That extends from Alamance to Rockingham and to the right for a little bit, to the east for a little bit, until 6 picks it up. So the state, to their credit, said, hey, this is a new program. We have limited number of resources that we really can target for enrollment. Let's get 2 regions up and going and working, and then 90 days later, let's plan for the rest to come in using the lessons learned and maybe some processes that we've improved upon. How they selected regions 2 and 4, don't know, but we're sitting in one of the areas that's going in the first wave.
So they're rolling out by region, but also classifications of Medicaid. I know that there are some individuals who are initially carved out of this managed care enrollment. So some of our listeners, some of our current participants with our programs, maybe they're hearing this for the first time and they're like, wait a minute, have I missed a letter? Am I supposed to be enrolling and doing something? But it's important to point out that dual eligibles, or individuals who have both Medicare and Medicaid, as well as CAP participants and PACE participants, all of whom we work with, are initially carved out, and they are not going active in this first rollout. Is that correct?
Yes.
From your lips to God's ears, right? I mean, that's kind of the way, I think they might still be getting correspondence from the state.
Okay.
And so I was recently at a community-wide, for our LME MCO, had a listening session, and the state was there, and so it's public comment, right? People are receiving letters.
Okay.
And it's concerning because some of the people might have been on tailored plans before, but now are in standard, and they won't receive information on how to get back to tailored necessarily from the enrollment broker. And there are carved out populations that might be receiving letters that say this is not for you to take any action, but it still might
Just for
encourage them
information.
to generate a phone call to somebody. And depending on who they direct that phone call to and what information is provided to them, it could be confusing.
Yeah. And there will be people staying in what is currently traditional Medicaid. That will be now called Medicaid Direct. So that is the term for the current Medicaid system.
Well, they added a new word, right? So that was brand new.
Right.
I mean, that was part of the discussion in the community, like, well, what's Medicaid Direct? And so Medicaid Direct is the old Medicaid.
Right.
It's now called Medicaid Direct.
Right.
And so the idea is that individuals have choice of providers. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes.
So you get the person who doesn't know as much as the rest of y'all. So because I'm hearing on the radio different, hey, we're coming into the community. We can help you with your GED. We can help
Right.
you lose
Yes.
weight. We
Right.
can help you do all this wonderful stuff. So it's the idea that they call the call center and they're given certain providers, like who are the providers coming in and
Yeah,
what are the choices?
There's 4 plans coming in, at
Okay.
least across statewide. There's one that's more a regional plan, but that's not even in our area.
Okay.
But of the 4 plans, yes, the beneficiaries, the Medicaid recipient, will have a choice. If they don't make a choice, one will be assigned to them. So what they should be looking at, of course, is across these 4 plans, what are the benefits? Are they right for me? And there will be standard benefits. So Medicaid is saying anything that's currently being provided will still be provided. So they're not taking anything off the table. But what many of these plans can do and will do is offer these additional benefits. So one we heard today, and I've heard on the radio, I've seen advertised on TV, is AmeriHealth Caritas saying that, we will help you get your GED. Well, that's not a Medicaid benefit.
Right.
But again, this is one of the benefits of bringing these 4 plans in is each plan is going to decide what we think is going to help people get healthy, of course, and reduce our cost. So let's have a win-win here. And so again, I think educating people, which will help them to maybe get a better job, reduce their dependence on Medicaid. And so again, to help them and rising tide lifts all boats. So let's help people, get degrees, get jobs, and have a living wage.
Absolutely.
So all of those benefits, of course, are important, but going back to Tim's point, some of the providers may not be enrolled with all 4 plans. So it may be a conversation that they need to have with their provider to find out if they are an approved provider or
Right.
whatever. But all of those decisions definitely weigh into, or all those components weigh into the decision-making process. And so is there someone that can help them navigate those questions? Because my understanding is they don't call Ashley, or they don't call me or you or DSS even, that there are individuals who are trained to provide that assistance. So how does someone go about finding those individuals?
So I'll answer it as directly as I can. I believe that there's an enrollment broker, and I believe it's Maximus, and I believe they're advertising for that phone number.
Okay.
And so in the Medicaid 2 and 4, you'll be choice counseled about your options. And to the state's credit, in this transformation, you don't want to have individual companies necessarily marketing directly to the individual. So while they're out there on radio and television, when you call in, Maximus will not be incentivized to enroll you in any particular plan except to inquire maybe who your provider is. and where you live, and here's the network, and here's the benefits. Explain. So it's an educational component.
Unbiased.
Unbiased.
Right.
And I still would say that if an individual can talk to Ashley or yourself or somebody they trust, that choice counseling isn't in a vacuum that Maximus and the individual have to do alone. That there's still a great dependence on resources like AAA, like yourselves, who can be supports for these individuals as they're making hard choices. And it is a hard choice, especially given timing on when the networks are filled out or not filled out. Approaching a cutover deadline mid-September when one will be auto-assigned. And auto-assignment, to the state's credit again, is going to use some algorithms that encourage people to stay with their current provider,
Right.
stay with family members. There is, a indication that the outcome is desirable for auto enrollment, and then there's reality, right? How we're all experiencing it, and the tension of, hey, do I have time to make the phone call? And when I talk to them, am I really listening and writing it down? And so the choice is a hard exercise that can be made easier with some of the choice counseling and the resources we just discussed. The auto enrollment is really to get us to the November cutover, because there comes a time where the old program is not the program
Right.
that is the new program.
Well, and you mentioned some dates in there, Tim, and just to reiterate, open enrollment is going on now for the changeover, and as you said, mid-September-ish is the cutoff, and November 1st is the go live, so it will be here before we know it. Just to reiterate, not everyone is transitioning in this first rollout. There are some people who will stay in Medicaid Direct for some amount of time. Right now, I think they're estimating 2 years or so. We know that things change as processes move along, and so this is a fluid process. Things are changing. We do have a couple of outlets for individuals to get some more information. If they have additional questions, they can go to ncmedicaidplans.gov or call 1-833-870-5500 if they would like to talk to someone about transformation and the managed care plans that are available. So I know we've covered a lot of ground in a really small amount of time, and we may have just opened up more questions than we offered answers. We need to do a 2-hour special with you guys and just let you have at it. But that is all we have time for today, unfortunately. So we just kind of wanted to give people an introduction and let them know that we're not out there doing this alone. We're the 38th state, did you say, to move to managed care for Medicaid, and so we've got some examples set out there, and it sounds like North Carolina's doing some good things to open up some new opportunities as well, putting some emphasis on those social determinants and healthy opportunities. And so I look forward to seeing how things transpire. Thank you both for joining us today. That is all we have time for. We hope that you can join us again next month when Ashley and I are going to have someone from the AARP talking to us about financial security and planning for retirement. Thank you.